I have discovered the biggest secret of the Domi Reversi in One Piece. With what happened in the latest chapters of the manga, the Domi Reversi is on everyone's lips. Everyone has many questions, and everyone has many doubts. In fact, it's a topic that has divided the community into two parts. One part is very happy with the Domi Reversi, and another is certainly upset or doubtful about how this might develop in the future, as it initially seems like an overly broken ability. For that reason, we are going to analyze the ability from top to bottom and find all the secrets this ability has that are reflected in Oda's manga. And besides, I will explain what the biggest secret of this Domi Reversi will be, which we will see in not too many chapters. Obviously, this video is going to be quite long, so if you have it on in the background, as you probably have, tell me what you're doing while it's on in the background. I know many of you play it to fall asleep. I know others play it while doing household chores, others while exercising. Some even tell me real crazy things. The other day I saw a comment from a guy who said he was a lifeguard and was watching my videos. I hope I never have to go to your beach or pool, so leave it in the comments because you know I love reading you. And to say obviously that this kind of video takes a lot of work, so I would really appreciate a big like, a subscription, and also that you hit the hype button if it appears in your country. In fact, if you leave me a comment if the hype button appears, you would do me a favor because I still don't quite understand what it is, since it's not available in Spain. That said, let's start with the video. In the recent chapters of One Piece, a terrifying power of the mysterious Emu was revealed, the technique known as Domi Reversi. This ability allows turning people into demons, colossal and violent beings under their control. At first glance, the Domi Reversi seems invincible. Emu literally flips the will of his victims to bring them to his side, creating enemies out of nowhere. However, the details surrounding this technique have given rise to an interesting theory. As I said, this technique has generated a lot of discussion in the community. People saying it's very broken, people saying it's not that big of a deal, and it hasn't left anyone indifferent. For that reason, let's analyze what's going on with this. To understand the possible weakness of the Domi Reversi, first, we'll review what this technique consists of. Emu, the enigmatic figure who rules from the shadows of the world government, demonstrated the ability to transform people into demons through a process that is almost a ritual. As observed, Emu creates a strange dark abyss in the air beneath the target, causing the victim to sink and then be physically turned upside down. Upon emerging from this dark circle of Emu, the person comes out with a new demonic identity. This transformation grants a much more powerful body and even a certain immortality as they regenerate any wounds suffered after the change. This comes at the cost of the individual's own will. Emu imposes this conversion even if the victim does not voluntarily accept it. That is, it does not require the affected person's consent to demonize them. But the most unsettling part is that the Domi Reversi spreads like a domino effect on the battlefield. If a person is turned into a demon, anyone caught in a sort of straight line between two transformed individuals will also be automatically transformed into a demon. We saw this in Elbaf when Dory and Brogy are turned into demons, and all the other giants aligned with them also trigger the Domi Reversi from one to another. This is something that has certainly gone unnoticed, as I have seen many people say it requires direct contact. It does not seem to be the case, since as I said, the rest of the demons were not initially touched. Perhaps it requires an initial contact and then the others follow in series. I do not know, but in other words, Emu can transform an entire group by flanking their targets. He converts two victims and everyone who is between them fall under the spell. All this without Emu having to target them one by one. This mechanic immediately reminds us of something. Indeed, the name of the Domi Reversi is not coincidental. Eiichiro Oda made a direct reference here to the classic board game, Reversi or Othello. In Reversi, two players place black or white pieces on a board. Each time they enclose the opponent's pieces between two of their own, all the enemy pieces trapped in the middle are flipped and changed to your color. Emu's Domi Reversi operates under the same flipping logic. Emu places two demons, and the people caught between them are forcibly switched sides, also becoming demon servants of Emu. This visual reference was even shown in the manga during the activation of the technique, and we saw interspersed panels of a Reversi board highlighting the parallel. Oda was giving us a hint of how it works. Emu is literally flipping people, just like in the game where you flip the pieces. It's a perverse game where Emu seeks to surround and reverse the loyalty of his enemies. Here, I'm going to take the opportunity to comment on a small theory about what could be the nerf, in quotes, the limitation of this technique, but it won't be the big solution that this video points to. The only thing I want to comment on is so you can see that there are certain interesting ideas, and this could be one of them. Beyond the reference to the game, the very name DOMI REVERSI hides a key meaning. It comes from Latin, and literally DOMI REVERSI means returned home, or those who returned home. This translation is extremely revealing. Why return home? At first glance, it doesn't make sense. What does home have to do with turning someone into an obedient demon? The answer might lie in the necessary condition for Imu to impose this curse. This is where the theory of the origin curse is born. It is proposed that Imu can only exercise the DOMI REVERSI on individuals who are in their homeland, in their place of origin. In other words, returning home would be the requirement to be the victim of this malevolent reversi. We can break down the Latin term to understand it better. Domi means at home or in the home, and reversi means returned or turned. The idea of turning at home or returning home fits surprisingly well with what we have seen in the plot. It seems to suggest that the spell brings back something latent within the person when they are in their land, perhaps their metaphorical inner demon, and brings it to the surface, turning their nature. That's why we could also interpret it as reversing the home or reversing loyalty, meaning changing what the person considers their allegiance or safe place. Put simply, Imu turns the victim's sense of home or homeland into a weak point, using that bond to dominate them. But the idea of the curse of origin doesn't come from nowhere. It is supported by all the known cases of DOMI REVERSI we have seen so far. Every victim we have seen fall to this technique was at home at the time of their transformation. Let's review these cases. Imu used the DOMI REVERSI on the legendary giants Dory and Brogy, along with other giant warriors from the island. It is important to highlight that Elbaf is the homeland of the giants. Dory and Brogy, whom we met in Little Garden, had finally returned to their ancestral home in Elbaf only to be turned into demons. All the giants affected on this occasion were natives of Elbaf, and no outsiders present were transformed. This last point is crucial, as so far all the people we have seen in Elbaf who have been converted were natives, meaning Imu turned the defenders of their own land against their people. Then we have the Davy family and Rox D. Zebek in God Valley. We saw how Rox D. Zebek and the Davy family were turned into demons during the Battle of God Valley. And where did this happen? Well, as I said, in God Valley. Here are interesting nuances, and this is totally key as the people we have seen affected by the DOMI REVERSI are all from the Davy clan family, and Rox said he was from that land, that it was his homeland. A fact that is very important and, as I say, perfectly accompanies what happened in Elbaf. These known examples fit the hypothesis. DOMI REVERSI does not transform just anyone, but only those who are in their homeland. It does not seem like a coincidence, but rather a kind of deliberate pattern. Oda would have left us a very clear trail. The name of the technique and the circumstances of its use point to the same hidden condition. So, with the above on the table, we can clearly formulate the theory. Imu needs their target to be in their place of origin to flip them with their DOMI REVERSI. This would be one of Imu's great weaknesses, their Achilles heel, hidden within an otherwise overwhelming power. It's not that Imu has openly revealed it, but the clues do suggest it. If the DOMI REVERSI only works in the target's homeland, then Imu cannot just arrive and cannot turn anyone anywhere. He must be very selective with the battlefield. This is a great relief for our protagonists. It means that as long as they keep the fight away from their home island, they will have protection from this spell. On the contrary, if any character ends up fighting in their own town or kingdom, they will be in danger of falling under Imu's control. The reason for returning home. Why would Imu need them to be at home? One possible explanation is almost mystical. Perhaps each person has a special connection with their homeland, a root or energy linked to their origins. And Imu takes advantage of this bond to twist their soul. We could call it a curse of origin because it traps the person in the place where they were born, and there their spirit is more vulnerable to being subdued. Perhaps far from home, one is out of reach for this magic, but upon stepping on your land, you fall under Imu's circle of influence if he decides to exploit it. From Imu's point of view, this explains some tactical decisions. For example, why did Imu attack Elbaf directly? Precisely because Elbaf is the home of the giants. There he could turn the most powerful warriors of that race into his puppets with the DOMI REVERSI, and if the giants had been away, at sea, or in another country, perhaps it wouldn't have worked. The same in God Valley. It is possible that Imu chose that place or that moment because he knew that certain key people were on his turf. Imu might even be manipulating confrontation scenarios so that enemies end up fighting in their own domains, making them vulnerable to the curse. Too much power. Upon hearing this one might think, wow, this really nerfs Imu a lot, right? Because if none of our protagonists are in their homeland during the final battle, Imu couldn't turn them into demons, period. Exactly. This condition acts as a kind of balance. Oda usually gives some limit to very broken fruits or powers, and this would be the logical limit of the Domi Reversi. It is powerful, but situational. For the Straw Hats, for example, most come from other islands, from the East Blue or other seas. As long as the war is waged in Mary Jawaz, in Laugh Tale, or anywhere that is not their hometown, they would be safe from this spell. Now, if suddenly Luffy had to fight in Fushia Village where he was born, or Zoro in Shimotsuki Village, watch out. But it is unlikely that the final battle will occur in those places. The dangers for certain characters. Not all allies can claim victory. Let's think about characters whose origins we know and who might end up fighting there. For example, if at some point a battle takes place in Arabasta and Vivi is there, could Imu convert her since she is in her native kingdom? It's possible. Or Sabo in the kingdom of Goa, in his land, or even Dragon if his base turned out to be his place of origin. Speculation aside, those who are indeed at home during the final saga clearly run a risk. An immediate case, the Giants of Elbaf have already experienced it firsthand. Also, what about the Samurai of Wano if Imu comes to attack Wano? Every rebellious country runs this risk. This is the first part of the video, which is a theory I found that has become very popular, and I must say there are quite a few arguments. I mean, it's quite a coincidence that this technique has only been used in these cases of people who are present in their birthplace. Precisely. On top of that, it fits with the name. It is true that I find it a bit strange that Imu knows, for example, that Zebek was native to God Valley. I don't know if there is certain information that might be revealed later in the manga, but as of today, I find it a bit strange. And this, as I say, I mention as a theory because I have seen it become very popular, especially in the Brazilian, French, and English communities, and I wanted to bring it to the Spanish community as a sort of first nerf. But let's go to the other nerf, because of course this simply implies that there are characters who cannot be turned with the Domi Reversi, and obviously that's a great relief. But of course, naturally, wherever you fight, there will always be people who were born there, because people usually stay where they have lived. So this ability, wherever it is a very big danger. As I said, it gives you a lot of strength and regeneration. So let's go directly to the main part of the video. If we accept that the Domi Reversi has this limit, the narrative implications for the climax of One Piece are enormous. Essentially, Imu could simply snap his fingers and turn the entire revolutionary army or all the pirates in the world into his puppets, unless he catches them in their respective homes. This adds a very interesting strategic game to the final war. The allied side must ensure to choose the battlefield carefully. The ideal for the allied side in the battle against Imu would be to choose a place that is not the home of any of them. For example, Mariajoa, the world capital. It is home to the Tenryubito, but not to the people we know. If the rebellion takes place there, Imu could not use the Domi Reversi on outsiders. And here I want to add that, for example, characters like Nami, we don't know exactly her origin, since she was found in the middle of a storm. It wouldn't surprise me at all if this theory is true, they end up giving a Domi Reversi to Nami in the place we least expect, and it is revealed to be her homeland. It would be interesting. Laughdale might be another neutral ground for everyone, except perhaps for Joy Boy in the past. And anyway, a neutral place neutralizes the Domi Reversi. Then they would also have to avoid geographical traps, as Imu could cunningly try to drag certain enemies to locations where he can convert them. We might see attempts by the world government to force battles, say in Elba, Wano, Arabasta, or other allied kingdoms of origin. All this to use the Domi Reversi there. People, if suddenly the revolutionary army incites local rebellions, Imu could appear on those islands to convert all the rebels there. This back and forth would make the heroes have to think twice about where they position their forces. An interesting angle is what happens with characters whose home no longer exists or is unknown. For example, Marshall D. Teach is not supposed to be born in God Valley, as rocks took them there once they were born. So for now, Teach has no homeland to return to, since if it were finally God Valley, it was erased from the map. An interesting thing is that we know the ancient kingdom was destroyed 800 years ago, and this could perfectly fit with the notion that the D's or the natural enemies of the gods, because if you can't subdue them with your most feared power due to having destroyed their land, that would explain why they are so feared. That is to say, it will be very crucial how Imu will seek to recreate certain situations like Elbaf or God Valley, while the people who face him should aim for the opposite, to not end up on one of those islands. But this will depend on their knowledge of his ability, meaning it's like a game of the same kind it references. But pay attention, because now we come to the most important part. We have explored the potential weakness of the DOMI REVERSI, but there remains a very important question: how to undo its effects on those who have already been converted, because it is useless to avoid being reversed if Imu already has an army of invincible demons. This is where another crucial detail that has not been given in the story comes into play. One comes from an unexpected source. Dracul Mihawk, yes, the best swordsman in the world, left us a very interesting observation during the Marineford War regarding Monkey D. Luffy, in the midst of the chaos of Marineford, Mihawk noticed that Luffy possesses a strange ability, and he said that he had the capacity to turn those around him into allies very easily, even former enemies or strangers, simply through the strength of his charisma and determination. Mihawk explicitly stated that this ability is the most dangerous in the whole world. Think about this: not Luffy's fruit, not Nika's fruit, not his haki, but the most fearsome thing about Luffy is his gift for winning allies. And this phrase takes on a new meaning when we put it in the context of the Domi Reversi. Imu forces people to be his allies, his puppets, while Luffy inspires people to join him as allies from the heart. They are two opposite sides of the same coin. On one hand, a false loyalty imposed by a spell. On the other, a true loyalty born from trust and hope. Mihawk, being someone who values individual strength, was very impressed and perhaps alarmed to see how Luffy could, without realizing it, add even enemy pirates to his cause during the war. That dangerous ability of Luffy could be the antidote against Imu's dangerous ability. But how could Luffy counter that Domi Reversi? Well, there are several ways in which his influence could make a difference. We know that the demons created by Imu retain some personality trait deep down. Although they are intoxicated by power and out of control, it is not that they completely lose who they were. This means that perhaps they can reach them emotionally or remind them who they are. And if there's someone capable of reaching the heart even of enemies, it's Luffy. We've seen it countless times. Luffy makes friends even while fighting. Characters who started off opposing him like Robin, Frankie, or even temporary enemies like Bon Clay, Mr. 3, or Hancock ended up on his side thanks to his ability and inspiring character. The mere presence of Luffy and his determination could crack Imu's control over an ancient ally turned demon. For example, let's consider Dory and Broggy, who have become violent demons. Don't you think that Usopp and Luffy could make them remember their pride as warriors of Elbaf, their bonds, promises, and get them to fight again against Imu's influence? It's possible. Luffy could literally turn the tables by restoring the original person that Imu tried to suppress. And this is important, because in Elbaf we saw when Dory and Broggy are destroying Elbaf itself under Imu's control, Usopp starts shouting at them, asking what they are doing, if they have no pride in being the warriors of Elbaf. And this scene is not there for nothing. Maybe Usopp will have a moment where he can help this Domi Reversi to turn around. But beyond his personal charisma, Luffy now has enormous symbolic weight. He has been revealed as the incarnation of Nika, the sun god and warrior of liberation. According to legend, Nika was a deity who would bring liberation to the slaves and joy to the world, freeing them from their oppressive masters. So what better embodiment of that prophecy than to free people turned into demons against their will? Imu enslaves and Nika liberates. Monkey D. Luffy, bearer of the Ito Ito no Mi fruit model Nika, is literally destined to free those who are chained, whether physically chained as slaves or mentally chained with a power like the Domi Reversi. We can anticipate a powerful scene where Luffy, with his contagious laughter and joy of Nika, breaks the darkness surrounding Imu's demons. In fact, Luffy's power in 5th gear, his Nika form, turns the environment into something cartoonish and full of laughter. It's hard to imagine that such an absurdly free and joyful aura wouldn't somehow affect a spell based on hatred and bloodlust. In the story of One Piece, laughter and freedom always triumph over oppression and fear. It's a recurring theme. Luffy could very well immunize or free others with that sun laughter. Another possibility is that Luffy ends up doing what he does best, turning enemies into friends. What if some of Imu's own demons rebel thanks to Luffy? Mihawk called Luffy the man with the most formidable power, the power to make allies. It wouldn't be far-fetched for one of these demons, perhaps a character we know, to break free from control after interacting with Luffy and decide to fight against Imu. After all, Imu is using his victims as disposable pawns. Luffy values each ally. That difference could ignite the dormant will within a demon. Let's imagine, for example, Dory and Broggy turning to fight against Imu. In short, Luffy represents the natural counterbalance to Domi Reversi. Imu manipulates the bond with the homeland to enslave. But, as I have said many times, the most important thing to keep in mind is that One Piece is a manga. One Piece is a work. One Piece is something that has to be conveyed to the fans. It has to reach your heart and your eyes. That is to say, simply having Luffy stand in front of the people with the DOMI REVERSI and convince them because he is Nika would be fine, but something would be missing. We need to have a reason. We need to have a trigger. Simply, this is not enough. In fact, this would even cause greater tension in the community, since simply reversing the DOMI REVERSI because of your good looks or your fruit would just be bland and nothing more. So let's go to something very important. There is something that has characterized Luffy since he entered the state of the 5th gear. And if you remember, the first thing we see when Luffy starts transforming into the 5th gear is that you begin to hear something like drums, the so-called drums of liberation. This is present at all times during the final fight against Kaido in the Wano arc, and it is shown to be something totally impressive, something that resonates everywhere and that everyone hears. Later, we realize that these drums of liberation are a kind of song or something like that, which even the Buccaneers themselves have danced to, who had the sun god Nika as their god. And we have already seen Kuma's father, or Kuma himself, or even Bonnie dance as if they were Nika with the drums of liberation. Moreover, when we have seen the giants, they have also made the gesture of dancing like Nika. They have danced doing the dance of liberation, with the drums of liberation. It is something that is present all the time. And here I am going to throw in an important fact from the manga, which is that Luffy, from the moment he started his journey, always said he wanted a musician. And later in the story, we met Brook, who joined the crew and is now the musician of the crew. One of Brook's greatest features is Binks' Sake, a legendary song from One Piece. And in case you didn't know, this song was written by Oda. He wrote all the lyrics and said he wanted to give this song a lot of importance. He himself said that he wanted this song to be so important that it would even be studied in schools in the future. That is to say, he put a lot of care and attention into the song, into the music. And although I have a video pending that explains all this in great detail, the One Piece Film Red movie is closely related to Imu. I will explain everything in detail later, because it really is going to be a long video and I have to explain many things, but to help you understand the similarity very simply, I show you this panel where we see Uta sitting on a throne with swords stuck in the ground, obviously referencing the empty throne with swords on the ground. A very evident sign. We also see Uta when she put on the armor that had a long pointed crown upwards, just like what Imu seems to have on top or something like that. But I go back to Uta, who is supposed to be symbolizing Imu in that movie in a very subtle way, is related to music. Everything has to do with music. The movie is practically a musical. That is to say, music is being given a very key importance. Returning again to the topic of how to solve the DOMI REVERSI and the drums of liberation, I think Oda is keeping something interesting for the future. I think he wants to instill a lot of fear in us with the DOMI REVERSI. We have seen it now with Rocks, and with Harold, we will also see it once we reach that point in the flashback. We have practically seen that yes, the DOMI REVERSI was given. We have even seen how Luffy's allies have already risen to fight against the Divine Knights, and also to fight against Gumko and Imu, but Luffy has not risen yet, since Luffy, when he rises, will be when the confrontations are already unfolding. Possibly Imu is not fighting anyone yet. And when Luffy arrives in his 5th gear form, covering that distance, he has to climb from the lower level of Elbaf to the middle level, where they are in the tree, which is a huge distance. When he arrives and those drums of liberation start to resonate, they will provoke something in the giants, and surely those drums will already start to awaken the giants a little. Here are several options we can develop. The first is that the drums of liberation plus Luffy's words are what reverse the DOMI REVERSI, which would be incredible, and I think it makes sense. I mean, they are the drums of liberation, the god of liberation. Luffy is related to liberation, liberating. He frees you from the DOMI REVERSI. I think it's the part that makes the most sense of all. And then we have an addition that I would like, which is for Brook to intervene. And perhaps with the drums of liberation playing in the background, he could play a song. I would like Binks' Sake to harmonize with those drums to amplify the melody. And maybe, using his own ability to move souls, he could move the souls corrupted by the DOMI REVERSI and fix them or something. And I think that would be quite interesting. Maybe Luffy can do it on a smaller scale, but thanks to Brook, it intensifies much more. Also, let's keep in mind that Brook seems to have had a history with Gumko, which will also be important because we will see what happened with Gumko, those memories that that came to Gumko where they came from, what the relationship between these two is. Precisely, Imu has possessed Gumko, which is very important, obviously, and I think this would be quite key. In fact, I think it's quite evident, just as it was very evident at the time that Rock's Daikisebek was going to be affected by the Domi Reversi in God Valley, which finally happened. I see it as very evident that the key to overcoming this ability of Emu is going to be Luffy's fruit. And I know it's very cliche, I know there are people who might not like it and that being predictable is not something people like, but for me it's not a problem. For me it depends more on the way it's handled, the way everything is interpreted, and the way it's presented. Since more or less, yes, we know what's going to happen, but it's also true that Oda can't be surprising us with absolutely everything all the time, as he's been doing manga for 25 years and more than 1,100 chapters, heading towards 1,200 already. So for me, it's quite evident that this is going to happen. Luffy with the fruit will be able to reverse Imu's Domi Reversi, and this, precisely, is going to be that great nerf to the Domi Reversi, because that's exactly why Imu was afraid of Nika, was afraid of this fruit, was afraid of this person, of this Joy Boy, because he knew that with Nika's fruit it was something that could reverse his own power. Something that even elevates, adds more value to the figure of liberation, as it would not be talking about physical slaves, but about conceptual slaves, mental slaves, about not being the owner of your own mind and your own actions, something that comes from much further back, and that the whole concept of slaves was in a way because of the Domi Reversi, and that now it has led to real slaves. For me, this would be very interesting, and if well handled and well written, which I trust Oda quite a bit in this regard, I think it would greatly enhance Luffy's character and would significantly nerf the Domi Reversi. This obviously wouldn't make the Domi Reversi completely useless, because as we've seen, if Nika isn't involved, that power is terrifying. Imu can go to any island, turn any person into a demon, and make them destroy or do whatever he wants under his will. And on top of that, as I said, with incredible regeneration. So if Luffy is not in the way, that person has no way to save themselves. So this is why I personally am not at all worried about the Domi Reversi. It doesn't scare me at all, and I don't think it's an ability that will break the logic of the series or anything like that. I know many people thought, and maybe after this video you've changed your opinion, that this ability was too impressive and too strong, but I truly believe that Oda won't take it to that point, that Oda will really hold back. And let's see, people, One Piece has power levels that keep rising, and we're seeing things that are very crazy, but this isn't going to be Dragon Ball, people. We're not gonna have characters of such magnitude, not at all. I think Imu, with that regeneration he seems to have, and the Domi Reversi is already quite good, especially considering that he won't be the final villain, and that the final villain will be Teach avenging his father. But well, that's another topic. In fact, if you want to see how Oda has already explained how Blackbeard Teach is going to be the final villain and not Imu, and how he has been hinting at it in the manga, you can find it on my channel, which I uploaded 2 videos ago, and the video is called something like The Master Plan of Marshall D. Teach or something. The most important thing is that you leave me all your thoughts about this in the comments. What is your theory about the Domi Reversi? Do you agree with my theory? Do you disagree? Leave it all in the comments. You know, I love reading your comments, responding to you, seeing how you debate among yourselves. I really love it, honestly. I think this is one of the best things about the channel, and I have to say that you are usually quite respectful, so thank you for that, which is also important. And you know that if you like the video, you can give it a big like and subscribe to the channel to see more videos.